was studying law and took a casino job to earn money to stay in school. Then, this happened.
Whilst I was working there, I met a man who was from Benin. We got familiar with each other and he said, there's other ways to make money. You know, I see you do like 10-hour shifts and then you tell me you're studying law at university. Like, what are you doing?
That encounter led to CJ traveling to Nigeria's border with Congo and finally being arrested for drug trafficking in Japan while 6 months pregnant. You don't want to miss CJ's incredible story only on Eye on Dependency this Sunday from 10 a.m. Listen live on I-95.5 FM or watch live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. The Counter-Trafficking Unit, Ministry of National Security, brings you Eye on Dependency. We don't just share stories, we change lives.
This Sunday on episode 39 of Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography.
Going off to university is a pivotal step in a young person's life. Many are not prepared to balance study and social life, nor prepared to live on their own. Meet CJ. She was studying law and took a casino job to earn money to stay in school. Then, this happened.
Whilst I was working there, I met a man who was from Benin. We got familiar with each other and he said, there's other ways to make money. You know, I see you do like 10-hour shifts and then you tell me you're studying law at university. Like, what are you doing?
That encounter led to CJ traveling to Nigeria's border with Congo and finally being arrested for drug trafficking in Japan while 6 months pregnant. You don't want to miss CJ's incredible story only on Eye on Dependency this Sunday from 10 a.m. Listen live on I-95.5 FM or watch live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. The Counter-Trafficking Unit, Ministry of National Security, brings you Eye on Dependency. We don't just share stories, we change lives. Don't just share stories, we change lives.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Independency right here on I-95.5 FM, live on the Independency Facebook page and YouTube channel. Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning, Garth, and welcome to Independency. We have a packed program for you. As you heard from the program, we'll be hearing CJ's story today, and it is one with a lot of twists and turns, so we need you to stay close to your radio or to your phone or your tablet or your device and make sure you listen to every single word of what CJ has to say.
This morning is a lesson to all of you. I'm sure there's almost everyone's dream, or every parent dream, to have their child go to university, whether here or overseas. But university life is a rough life. It can be a rough life for those who cannot deal with it. And sometimes things happen. You see, when they're out of your sight, you no longer have control of what happens to them. Mm-hmm. And this is where, if you have a child going off to university in a while, or they're there now, I think you should listen and then
Get them to listen too.
And ask them to listen if they could. And have a chat with them afterwards and say, is there anything that you heard this morning or what I heard this morning is applicable to you? You will hear a story of upbringing, and we always speak here about foundation. So you will hear a story about foundation and how important it is to send that child off to university. You will hear about that. You will hear about entering university with so much baggage that you will end up how your child could end up if you send them off with more baggage than they're supposed to have. And when I say baggage, I think you'll understand what I mean.
Yes, emotional baggage. I mean, this is as the promo says, it's a critical point in a young person's life, going off to university. And do they have the skills to cope not just with the academics, but with the social life and the meeting new people and having new experiences and living on your own? That can be a very daunting task for a lot of young people, and CJ's story, unfortunately, is evidence of that.
So how have you prepared your child for university. Like I said, even in Trinidad and Tobago here, we've had university students on this program, and they spoke about the challenges with substance abuse and alcohol use, misuse, and all of that. We've heard that, and we've heard those stories, and we're not making this up. Sunday morning, from our mouth to God's ear, all we want to do is educate you, forewarn you, and make you understand that no one is protected from this. But it must start from home. So we go to a break, and when we return, this again too has the components of the act, the means, and the purpose of human trafficking. So once again, you have the opportunity to identify that while you're listening. You need some time this morning, folks, to listen to CJ's story. It's very important. It's a life lesson, and we are sure that you are going to leave this morning, after we're done, with enough ammunition to arm your child with. So we go to that break, and when we return with CJ's story, you're listening to Iron Dependency.
And his grandson Kasik.
Slavery, a terrible time in our history. The kidnapping, buying and selling of people for profit, the exploitation of another human being. It still exists today. It has a new name: human trafficking. Anyone can be a victim. There is forced labor, sexual exploitation, and domestic servitude. Human trafficking is a worldwide problem and an emerging concern for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. If you know of or suspect human trafficking activity, call the counter-trafficking hotline at 800-4CTU or 800-4288. Human trafficking is a crime. Identify it, report it, stop it. A message from the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security.
50 by 20, 50 by 25.
This is Kyron Pollard. When you play, do it the legal way. Don't bet on illegal gaming.
Do you want to support our work at Ion Dependency? Here are 3 ways to do so. You can make a donation to the Ion Dependency account at Republic Bank. You can follow the Ion Dependency page on Facebook. You can subscribe to the Ion Dependency channel on YouTube. Liking, commenting, and sharing the live on a Sunday also helps. Thanks in advance for your support.
Remember, she's British, so her accent will be a little thick, so pay close attention to the words, pay close attention to the journey, pay close attention especially to foundation. Let's hear how you feel about this and if you identify with what you're about to hear. Part 1 of CJ's story.
I grew up abroad in Malaysia, and I was there until I was 18. I grew up in a family that my mum drank a lot. There was a lot of domestic violence between my parents. I thought that if I behaved myself, my parents wouldn't fight. As a child, you seem to think that you're the cause of your parents' problems. So from an early age, I started to just behave the best I could at home. So even if I got in trouble at school, I wouldn't bring that home. I wouldn't tell them. I'd try and sort all my own problems out, because at home, mum was always drinking. They were fighting. They had loads of issues going on between them. And I also had a younger sister that I wanted to protect from all of this as best as I could. So by the time I got to 18, I had already formed sort of 2 personalities. Somebody who outside didn't really fit in with her peers because she felt a lot maturer than them, having to sort of be the parent at home. And that caused me to seek out people who are older than me to hang out with. And I guess at that time I just wanted to prove to myself I was older, so I was doing things that I shouldn't have done even at that age. I was going out to clubs and going out to parties when I was 15, 16. My parents had no idea about any of this. I was sneaking out from home and hanging out with people who I probably shouldn't have hung out with, and then coming home and still getting good grades, being the good girl at home, trying to keep my family together despite all this stuff going on. And because I couldn't tell my family how I felt about, you know, seeing my parents being abusive to each other, and not really being able to tell anyone in my peer group the truth about that either, because I didn't think they understood. I was in an international school, and you know, everyone seemed to have perfect lives, even though at the time, now I know that they didn't, but everyone does the same thing. They hide the issues and they don't ask for help and they don't talk to people.
How much younger was your sister?
She was 2 years. So those were the two sides of my personality. And when I got to 18 and I could go abroad, sort of back home to the United Kingdom to go to university, I was like over the moon, because I felt like I could be free. I could be my real self, who I thought was this other person. And so that's what I did when I got to university. I clung to that side, and still I didn't tell my family anything. So at uni I got into debt the first year by using my student loan to just go out, and I became like a person pleaser. So, you know, when I had friends, I'd just be like, oh, I'll go and buy all the drinks, and you know, the debt I was incurring was because I was just trying to do the same things I was doing at home, look after people, make sure people are all right, make sure everyone's okay, having a good time, and not thinking about me, not thinking about, I'm getting into debt here, I need to sort out my own issues. So after about 2 years in uni, I was in about $2,000 worth of debt, and to me that was massive. Like, you know, red letters coming on the door, you're going to go to prison, and I was just like, this is ridiculous, like, this is not me. And all the time I didn't tell my family, I didn't tell my parents. They assumed that I was just living a really quiet life at university.
Now, you think this had a little bit with low self-esteem, you think, because of what was happening at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there was this conflict. I didn't know who I was. I was trying to prove myself to be one side, and then the other side of me, you know, was yearning for any sort of affection that I wasn't getting from my parents because of the issues that they were having. So absolutely, I think I did have lower self-esteem. I was just looking to find my identity in who I was, and yet still trying to live these double lives.
Where did your parents, what did they do for a living?
Okay, so my dad was an English teacher at a school and a university, and my mum she was in the fitness industry, so yoga, aerobics, all of that sort of stuff.
And did you ever figure out what were the issues between them that they were fighting all the time?
Absolutely. I think with my mum, there's a lot of deep-seated unhappiness, and again, I don't think she really knew who she was. She's mixed race, so her father is Nigerian and her mum's Dutch, and she grew up in England suffering racism, having the issues of two different cultures in the same family in a time when there was this idea that children should be seen and not heard. So she was never able to explore that, and she sort of was shunned from her Nigerian side. We weren't allowed to talk about it. She grew up, her father banned them from speaking about it because he'd fled Nigeria because of like crime and stuff that had gone on there. So there was a lot of issues in her own family that never got sorted out, and that she carried with her, and she turned to drink, and that caused problems because my father didn't know how to control her. I guess is the best way to say, you know, enough's enough, let's get help. He just became part of the enabling circle, and so did my sister and I. We became part of that enabling circle where mummy would get really drunk, stay up half the night, you know, throwing things, attacking things, and in the morning we'd be so glad it's over, we would just pretend everything's normal again and just be like, we love you, mummy, and we'd never ever deal with it. So it became something that was part of our family, something that was normal, something that, you know, she was just allowed to drink and behave like this and have no consequences. And it's only, you know, sort of now at the end of my prison sentence, being free, that I've been able to reflect and look back as to why that cycle and all that stuff happened. Is because there was no help, there was no consequences, that behaviour was just allowed.
Did they stay together?
They're going through like a separation at the moment. I guess they were very close to separating when all of this happened to me, and then I suppose because of me they decided to stay together throughout the time that I was in prison. And then the minute I was released, my dad said, I'm done. So in a way he was trying to be strong and be the support for my mum, because as you'll find out, my mum raised my daughter, so there's a lot to come out.
So that was part one. So CJ was talking about her early life and her family life in particular, and how that impacted on her growing up, and the the things that she had to think about while she was living on her own.
Let's go to part 2.
Where she talks about her university life now.
$2,000 in debt, student loan.
Yeah.
Were you scared?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're telling lies and living a life of deception, you create, I see it like a web, like a spider's web, and you create the web and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because unless you're going to just wipe it clean, you have to continue making lies to keep up the central lie. So at that point, I started working in a casino, like in the evenings, in order to just somehow bring some income in to try and repay the debt so I could still go to uni and go to this casino at night. And again, like, the casino was not the right place for me to work because it was not the right type of people in there. And whilst I was working there, I met a man who was from Benin. He said to me that, you know, we got familiar with each other, and he said, this is not, you know, there's other ways to make money. You don't have to be here working. You know, I see you do like 10-hour shifts and then you tell me you're studying law at university. Like, what are you doing? So
before you continue with him, a lot of students in university find themselves in these positions.
Yeah.
How do you balance studying and working? How is that possible?
I think it is definitely possible if you find the right job and you make sure that the job works for you, the people aren't trying to use you. I think the casino was the wrong place for me because they just want you to make money, and even the rules of working there, the soft rules were like you had to wear a top that was low cut, you had to encourage the punters to spend money, whatever that took. You have to talk to them, you have to do things that maybe, I think in this society, is bordering on illegal, but they were just part of, and you know, you got to keep, it was a good place to work because you got to keep your tips, and if you made certain, you know, the more you were with somebody, the more tips you would get, so it was seen as a good thing to do in the student circle. But you couldn't really then go to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning and then get up for a lecture at 9 o'clock in the morning, you know, so it wasn't the right choice. And so I'd say make the right choice. So whether it's a weekend job or just doing a couple hours in a shop, you know, and making sure that when you agree to do it, don't just think of yourself as, oh, I'm a student, I need money. Think of it like, actually, I've got this job, I'm doing something for my employer. What am I getting back? Just as we would do now in the working world, we would make sure that we have you know, benefits of working in that role, and then they should be flexible. And if it's not a job like that, like some of my friends worked in pizza shops or, you know, were a waitress, where they could say, you know what, I've got exams, can I have this week off? Or I've actually got a holiday, can I work extra time? And it was a better relationship with their workplace.
How prevalent is this with students in university?
The student fees are going up and up for university, so I can only imagine it's much more now than in the time I went to university. A lot of people I knew had jobs. Obviously, depends on the university you go to. Some universities, the people come from very privileged backgrounds, and therefore they're more likely not to. But in the majority, people do have to do some form of part-time work or holiday work even, and allow their studying time to be free of work, but then work throughout the holidays. So yeah, I don't think it's not uncommon.
And some employers know.
Absolutely.
And some of them take advantage.
Yeah, so in towns and cities where there are universities, they know that there's a high student population, and sometimes it's actually really hard to get jobs. So when I was a student, it was actually very hard because there were so many students looking for work. That's what really led me to go towards the casino. And I suppose that's the danger, is that the easier jobs to get will be the ones you probably shouldn't be going for. So, you know, the jobs that would be the best would be the ones on campus, you know, running the shops and the food. But there are only so many jobs, and a lot of students who need extra money, especially people coming from abroad and studying in the UK, you know, they were the majority of people who were getting jobs because they came from places where they had, you know, they were less privileged. So I think you just have to be really mindful that there obviously are going to be some places of work that know that there's a lot of students out there and might choose to be less ethical.
I have a question about the university life and lifestyle. Were you aware at that time of the prevalence of alcohol abuse among students, and did that impact on you at all while you were there?
So like the culture in the UK, unfortunately, is pretty bad around alcohol. It's not as bad as America, but in your first week it's called Freshers Week, and every night you go out clubbing, partying, and there's this expectation and culture that you're going to drink a lot and you're going to show how tough or how mature you are by the amount you can drink. And so you will see a lot of drunk students, some not making it home, some collapsing outside of clubs, if there are house parties, funneling, so like hoses coming out the top window to the bottom, and you have to stand there and consume whatever they put down there. And you have freshers reps who are, so I ended up becoming a freshie rep in year 2, and it's sort of like a privileged position where you go back to the hall and you look after those freshers and you plan all the activities they're going to do, and especially with a lot of the UK universities, they have halls of residence, so you stay in the hall and each hall sort of like competes against each other. And the idea is to raise money for charity, but a lot of the time this is used as an opportunity to drink as much as you can, pay for alcohol, and all that money contributes towards charity, but the essence, you're 17, 18, 19, 20 is just to get drunk and have a great time with your friends. And obviously again, things creep in, like smoking marijuana, taking harder drugs. So actually, I grew up in a country where it was illegal to have any drugs, and like the first night I was there, I got really drunk and I had a cigarette, and then someone passed me what I thought was a cigarette, and I just smoked, and I said, oh, this really tastes disgusting, I don't want it. And the guy was like, yo, chill, it's just, and he said like a name, like I didn't know, and I was like, what's that? And he was like, said another name, and I was like, what's that? Because I was just this naive girl who'd lived abroad, and he's like, it's marijuana. And I was just like, I grabbed my neck, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, because I'm still in the mindset of where I grew up. And he was just looking at me like, what are you saying is okay? And then again, that peer pressure's coming in, like don't overreact, this is totally uncool. And I was just like, oh, is it okay? He was like, yeah, it's totally fine, everyone does it, it's fine. And so that's how it can start, from something where you just think, oh, I'm never going to be that kind of person, I'm not going to take it, because you've got a mindset of druggies sitting in a den, in a really horrible situation, to then being offered it in a place where you're comfortable, you're happy with people you've just met, you're having the time of your life, and it's just a step which isn't too serious because this guy said it isn't, so. And then that can happen just as easily from cigarettes to marijuana, from marijuana to ecstasy to whatever else goes on after that.
And you have all of that in university, you saw all of those?
Absolutely, yeah. First week is just people find out who they are, and it's almost, it can break you, because you can say, oh, I'm going to go to university, and all I'm going to think about is pleasing my parents, doing really well, getting a job. And then you can experience that in your first week and think, oh my god, I've met these amazing people, we speak about the same things, we have the same interests, but yet they party, they do this, so surely that's okay. And it measures people, like if you've had a good upbringing, I think, loving parents, good home, you're able to say, you know what, I love what you're doing, but tonight I'm going to stay in and study because this is what I want. But for people who have lower self-esteem, who maybe haven't had that affection, that love from home, and who want to please people, are more likely to say, actually, no, I'll put the work aside, I'll go out, to the point where it's too late, they've got a third, or they're dropping out, and whatever else is going on in their life. It really just depends on the person and how strong their own principles are. Because I knew people who were like, no, I don't want to do that. And they would be like, come on, the peer pressure. Be like, no, I don't want to do that. And in a way, those are the people, now I look back, I think, I admire you more than the people who just followed. And I think when you're younger, you don't see that. You just think, oh, I'm part of the crew, I'm part of the group, and therefore I'm safe, I'm good. Whereas a lot of people who actually stood their ground and just said, I don't need to do that, who maybe people said they were losers, at the time at university, actually they were the ones who did really well. I know a lot of people who've done really well and done both, but they knew when to say no. Like, I had a really big weekend, but now I must really study hard, so no. So it's just key that you're able to really know what's important to you, why are you doing something, and are you doing something too much? Is there a point when you should just say no and be able to get that balance between having fun and getting what you want?
In addition to that, were there any services provided by the university itself in terms of providing information to students about alcohol abuse and other things?
A lot, but it depends. If your mindset is, I don't have an issue, I'm just having fun, which is what it's painted out to be, you're not really going to go and seek out those services. So there's a lot like there on offer. There's even the student radio, which often has programs about this, and you can call in at night if you're distressed, and so there's a really supportive environment. It just depends where you end up and what choices you make from that day one, and whether you're open to getting that help if you do need it.
So you had a radio station on campus,
yeah,
where people would call If they had, well, of course, the normal run-of-the-mill radio, but they have times where you can call. Tell us about
There's
it.
like I think it was called like a night line or something, and you could call in anonymously like during the night and just see if they had an issue. Sort of like when I think of prisons, like the Samaritans and the listeners, but on a more vocal way. So you could tune in and hear that other students are having issues. No matter what it was, I'm feeling lonely, I'm not making my lectures, I don't know, I feel picked on, whatever, it could be anything, it doesn't have to be related to drugs or alcohol. Drugs and alcohol, people tend to tell their friends. I think maybe they might have issues rather than going to the right services. I think because there's still a stigma around that when there shouldn't be, really.
Do you have any ideas on how we can reach young people at that stage?
I would just say...
What's the best way to reach them?
I would just say, like, as much as possible, just do things in moderation. Like, you don't have to stick out and be like, no, I'm not going to go out tonight. But just say, actually, I'm going to go out, but what else do I want to do tomorrow? Okay, I'll set a goal. I'll be back by 11, or, I only have one drink. Just really check with yourself, like, what do you want? Are you going out because the person you're sharing a room with was like, please come, I can't go to this party with nobody else. Like, really look into the reasons why you're doing something, and maybe just check that. Say, like, what would my mom think if she knew, or what would my sister think if she knew, or what would my teacher think if he knew. Just check it against other people and try and listen to that, and I suppose don't be in a rush to make loads of friends as well, because that can be the trap if you're feeling isolated, which everyone does when they come to uni because they don't know anyone. Not many people know people. Just really have the confidence in yourself to think, I will make good friends, and it will take time, and it doesn't need to happen today. And just focus on the first few weeks on attending your lectures, making that the priority, and if you can still go out at night, if you can still partake in everything else, do it. But just make sure that you still check in and you don't let things slide, because some people will be like, it's fine, we don't need to go to that lecture. It's fine, we don't need to go to that because it's we can just read the notes online. But just think, like, why are you paying all this money, and why have they put this up if it's not really something you have to attend? And don't get like with what everyone is saying.
Because as you said, there are those who stood up and said no.
Absolutely.
And they were isolated.
Yeah.
But they did well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the benefit of hindsight is amazing. So, I know a lot of people who just didn't really go out. Maybe they had the occasional drink at the pub on a Friday night throughout their 3 years or 4 years at uni, but they wouldn't be going out during the week. They wouldn't be going to sort of raves which lasted all night long, because that just knocks out your whole weekend. And they were the people who did extremely well, who are working in banks and law firms at the moment and earning like millions, and they can now do whatever they want, having not wasted those 3 or 4 years. And I think sometimes it's tough, like if you're really young and maybe you're not mature enough to go to uni, like take a year out, do some work, collect some money, like where you are, and then make that decision to go later when you're less likely to be caught up with just making friends. And also know that you don't have to just do that. You can do both, but just make sure you're really aware of who you are and what you want. Because I have friends as well who did both, who went out but also knew when to say enough is enough, and to just really knuckle down and study so that they did the best they could in every area and did themselves proud.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you're hearing here is in hindsight. So now we've laid the foundation for you. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and you are hearing from CJ. She just laid the foundation for you about how she's about to enter another zone or walk through a portal by accepting. And how did she end up in Japan, 6 months pregnant, charged for trafficking?
Well, I think this is where it's all started. You'd heard the next clip where she got her job, as she mentioned it before, she got a job in a casino. And that is really where it started to go awry for CJ. Let's go to that clip.
Yes, and welcome to those of you on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you very much for your usual support. Those of you listening to us on 95.5 FM, thank you as well. Let's continue this journey. And we head into the casino now. Here's CJ once again.
Okay, so I can say on two sides, I knew students who spent a lot of time in their rooms going on online card game casino websites and used to think that they'd be able to make thousands of pounds sitting in their room at university. And for some of them, their studies suffered because they became addicted and they were constantly trying to play blackjack or poker and beat the computer. And for some, they managed to maintain it whilst doing their degree. But speaking to them now, they all say it was just a waste of time because no one made it rich. The computer still won at the end of the day. One of them was a computer scientist and he tried to create an algorithm to beat the computer and he still didn't. So at the end of the day, it was a bit of luck and a whole lot of the house wins. Not only do I see some friends get into a lot of debt because of that, also working the casino, I saw a lot more men coming into the casinos. But if you even walk around today in the UK, there's a lot of slot machine casinos, which I don't really think of as casinos now because they're all just machines in there, whereas casinos in my time were, with real people sitting around tables, playing with real cards rather than playing in the slot machines. But the slot machine industry here is huge, and some of the clients that we have worked with where I work now have lost almost £250,000 in a year. One man inherited a lot of money when his wife passed away, sadly, and because he was drinking a lot and really not in the right mindset at all, just kept going back to these slot machines and lost the entire amount there, and is in serious trouble at the moment. So I don't really know many people at all who have done well through gambling and betting. I suppose the people I saw when I worked in the casino, some of them were extremely wealthy and they used the casino as a way to let off steam, but they were smart. They knew, okay, I'm going to, I make millions, but I'm only going to spend £200 here tonight and I expect to lose it. I'm just here for fun, to have a drink and to play. So people who came in with that mentality, they were happy, they weren't addicted, they were just there to do it for fun. But other people who came in wanting to make money continually chased that. If they lost £10, they'd be like, right, I'm going to play this up. Okay, I won. And they would always end up losing, and they would always be drinking more and more and be getting more and more upset, and stay there longer and longer. And it was just, it was really sad to see, because you were thinking, your families, why are you here? You're all alone. What's going on, in your life? You're here at 4 a.m. I see you almost every day. So, yeah, I think it's highly addictive and extremely sad. I'd say that, and with drugs, people are always trying to chase that first initial feeling they get, and they end up taking more and more, and then end up this cycle of feeling worse and worse about themselves because of the effects on their body.
Did the casino offer help?
Not at all. So obviously the casino doesn't see what it's doing, especially at the time I was doing, as a problem. They were focusing more on the idea that it was a recreational thing, that people came in and chose to spend their money freely and then could leave it. They would see it as you coming in and going to a cinema. They'd see it as an experience. They would not really acknowledge or accept at that time that there were people who became problem gamblers. So no, there was no help. If anything, the waitresses who were there are encouraged to flirt, encouraged to sell you more alcohol, encouraged to get into conversations with you, so you can have someone who's looking really lonely and you're encouraged to go and speak with them to make their experience. Obviously, the way the waitresses are being sold it is that you're making their experience better, they end up spending more money, make more money for the club, but also, they're more likely to win. So it's all coated in sugary words to make you think that it's fine, but if you really look underneath the surface, it's exploitation, it's manipulation, it's making people in there who, let's say, have low self-esteem feel wanted and needed, that they can come to this environment, meet women they would never meet before, have conversations they would probably never have, and it's all false and fake in order to make you spend more money and drink more alcohol, and then you're making less rational choices, and then you're getting further into debt.
So that was CJ's commentary on gambling based on her experience working in casino. And we do, if we have time, we'll share with you some information about gambling addiction before we leave today. The next clip, before we go to a second break, is she's outlining the plan. When she reached out to this gentleman for help, he explained to her what the plan would be in order for her to make some money to pay the debts, the mountain of debts that she was in.
So, with all the hindsight, in reality, this is what can happen as well. Let's go to that now. The plan. This is CJ. If you're just joining us, a young lady giving her account of her journey in university and where it led her, what happened. Let's go to CJ once again.
So you're in this environment.
Yeah.
How old were you at that time?
21.
How long before this guy approached you?
About a month. Didn't work there very long. He obviously could see I probably stuck out, and we had some good conversations, because at least I'd try and have good conversations with people rather than just, I don't know, because for me, I wasn't really about that fakeness. So if I could just sit next to someone and have a conversation and maybe make them feel better, or we could talk about their family, that'd be good. But with this guy, we had some conversations about Africa, about Nigeria, because at the time my partner was Nigerian, so we had this connection about that. So that was interesting. And probably after about a week, so he saw me every day, he came back every day. That's when he said, "You must be really broke. Why are you here? You're a smart girl, you're articulate, you're not like the other girls here. Why are you here?" And I said, really just to pay the bills. Obviously I had far too much fun in my first year, my second year, and I just want to be able to make some money. And then he said to me, well, there are loads of other ways to make it. And he said, I know quite a few, like I work with quite a few girls like you. So I was like, okay. So again, he was normalizing it to me, making it sound like it's just something you can do, that he does it with a lot of people. And said, if ever you wanted to do something that make a bit more money, just call me. So he gave me his card and he said, you're very welcome to speak to some of the girls I work with. And he left it at that. So again, it was like no pressure, and so I continued to see him for probably like 2 weeks there, and he became kind of like my favourite client. He was normal, I suppose, respectful, and we just had sort of normal conversations. So, and I suppose in my mind, I just thought, okay, like he's all right. And if anything happened, he's there, so he's okay. He seems okay. Because I think as a woman in this environment, it's very unusual for men not to be trying to hassle you, to have sex with you, to touch you. So I suppose I felt like he was good because he wasn't doing those things. So I think about 3 weeks later, I stopped working there. It just got too much. With everything I was trying to do, I couldn't maintain that lifestyle, and I didn't see him again. I had his card, he didn't have my number, that was that. About like 6 months later, I started to get into more debt, and still not being able to match up with the jobs I had and what I was doing. I didn't want to ask my family for help either, because still stuff was going on at home. And then my partner, he was at university in the UK, he ended up overstaying his visa and he was sent back to Nigeria. So for about a year after that, I was going to see him every holiday, and again, that created more debt because I was having to pay for the flight, pay for my phone whilst I was in Nigeria, because my family didn't know I was there, so I was using my phone and just racking up, like, it's not like nowadays we have WhatsApp. Again, hundreds of pounds of debt. I was just so naive. I didn't know like who to ask for or how to ask for, and I guess I had that pride as well that I grew up in my family, like you don't talk to other people, you deal with it yourself. So like nowadays when I talk to young people, I advise them, just go to Citizens Advice Bureau, they'll help you with a debt plan. Go and speak to your bank even, they'll sit down with you. But at that time I just didn't know those are things you could do, so I just was trying to get through it myself. I didn't even let my peers know who I was living with in a house, because you share a house in second and third year. You tend to do that as a student, you just pay for your own room. I still wanted to keep up this idea that I was fine, I was going to uni, I was studying really hard, I was also going out at night and like partying, but I just couldn't afford it, and I couldn't. And I had a student loan. I was getting more and more into debt with this, not only the student loan but the overdraft facility that the banks let you have. And then knowing sort of the wrong people at university, they were like, if you need more money, you can open up another bank account. And in those days, you could open a bank account with each bank. And so I had an overdraft with each bank. I was at a point where it was like, it seems okay, but it's not okay, really, if you looked into what it was. Because everything's legitimate, but it's not your money. You shouldn't be having bank accounts, student bank accounts with different banks. So I just turned, I think at 22, I fell pregnant. And at that point, I was like, this has got to stop. Like,
So that's why you say Nigerian guy?
Yeah, that's with my husband. So we got married when I was 21, still together. So he didn't really know like the level of my debt, because again, like I didn't really tell him. And when I fell pregnant with my daughter, I was, this needs to stop. I didn't ever imagine that I would have a child and not have savings in order to look after them. So that's, I think, towards the time, like about 3 or 4 months in, that's when I started to get red letters under my door saying, like, you haven't paid your water, like basic things that needed to be paid. And that's when I was like, I don't know what to do. And I thought of that guy that I'd met a year before, that I had his card, and I called him. And as soon as I called him, he knew exactly who I was. And he was just like, oh, I'm so glad, like, I don't know what happened to you, like, why didn't you ever call me, all that stuff. What's up, are you in trouble? And I said, well, yeah, like, I need to make some money. And he was like, yeah, okay, why don't you come and meet me and we can chat about things that you can do. And so I went to go meet him. And I suppose at that stage of my life, I'd already taken a lot of risks. I was used to lying, not telling people where I was going, being this double person, fake it till you make it kind of person. So when I met him, I was just trying to, this is cool too. Just as those guys did with the marijuana with me in the first week, I just pretend I knew not to overreact by that stage. So he was just like, look, it's very simple. Obviously, this was over several hours, explained it to me that all you need to do is go abroad, carry a bag back to the UK. I knew it was going to be something about that. Like, I knew you couldn't make money without doing something illegal. And I knew of people on campus who did all sorts of things, let people use their bank account. People would pay money in and then they would withdraw it and give it to them. They'd get a cut, like £100, but these people put 25k through their account. So I knew people were doing fraud at university. I knew people were doing things in order to make money, but that wasn't really talked about, and that was just sort of, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get through university, that sort of thing. So I just thought maybe it'd be something like that. And then I'd like risk assess it in my mind. And he was really good at that. Every time I was uncomfortable, or I was like, oh my God, what about this or this? He'd be like, oh, well, I pay off the airport. People in Benin, they work for me. You know what it's like in Nigeria. It's, playing on all of that we were comrades. Pay off the airport, you get off at Brussels and you take a train and then comes to UK, and there's no border controls on the train. And then I'm like, well, what about dogs? And then he's just like, well, what we do is we soak your clothes inside the drugs and you wear it and you can't smell it. There was all these like different risk assessment levels, of things that we could do to make sure I was comfortable. So from carrying a suitcase, it went to, okay, we'll soak your clothes and the drugs, and we'll pay off the airport. So in my mind, I was like, okay, tick, tick, tick. Okay, it's kind of seeming like a bit more viable if I was going to consider it. That's how I was trying to reason it. And then he was like, well, you don't have to decide now. You can meet some of the girls that I know who've done it. You can talk to them. You can go to, if you did decide to do it, I'd pay for everything, your ticket. And I was concerned about my family and them not knowing and how long it was going to take. And again, he like talked me through all those things, just like it was just going on holiday. It wasn't, At first, he was like, oh, we'd probably pay you £5,000 if you did this. And then I was just like, okay, but it's like a lot of risk to take for this, And so then he was just like, okay, well, maybe I'll see if I can just pay you more out of my money. So again, made me seem like he's doing me a favour. And he's like, I'm sure I could give you like another 3. And then, obviously I would take less, but because, like I really care about you and I want to make sure that this is fair. So he's like, okay, we'll pay you 8 when you come back. And so it was just kind of left at that. And he was like, just let me know, call me. And if you're interested, I'll send you down to London. You can meet my people there, stay there for a bit. And then when you're ready, we'll just send you over. And he said, you don't need to worry about anything at all.
So that was part 4 of CJ's story. This is where she has decided she's gonna take the risk of accepting this offer to carry drugs from England to Benin, of all places.
Folks, we hope you're paying attention. And she wasn't armed. CJ wasn't armed. And water more than flowers, we say here.
Mm-hmm.
She got pregnant. But I think we could always say too that she probably knew this safety net was there. So she knew she would have had to call that number at some point. But she thought she would have not have to do that. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. If for some reason we can't speak to you this morning, but that's what social media is for now. Let's talk about what you're hearing so far. Has it hit home? Do you think there's someone you can share this information with? After this break, we return with now CJ ending up in Nigeria, her husband not knowing she's there until, again, something hit the fan and
Yes.
he had to find out that she was in Nigeria. It's a whole mess. Please stay with us. You're listening to Dependency. We'll be back with more lessons.
Slavery, a terrible time in our history. The kidnapping, buying and selling of people for profit, the exploitation of another human being. It still exists today. It has a new name: human trafficking. Anyone can be a victim. There is forced labor, sexual exploitation, and domestic servitude. Human trafficking is a worldwide problem and an emerging concern for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. If you know of or suspect human trafficking activity, call the counter-trafficking hotline at 800-4CTU or 800-4288. Human trafficking is a crime. Identify it, report it, stop it. A message from the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security.
50 by 20, 50 by 25.
This is Kyron Pollard. When you play, do it the legal way. Don't bet on illegal gaming.
Hi, I'm Kathy, and I'm an active alumni and volunteer at the Toronto Drug Treatment Court. You're listening to Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha, Trinidad and Tobago. Drug Treatment Court's work.
This Sunday on episode 39 of Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography.
Going off to university is a pivotal step in a young person's life. Many are not prepared to balance study and
So about a week later, I called him back. I agreed. I didn't tell my partner anything. I didn't tell my friends, my family. Yeah, he's still in Nigeria. He would have just gone insane. He would have just lost the plot if he knew what I was about to do. Because obviously, now I know what he thinks, but knowing Nigerians, he'd say, I know what kind of people these people are, and I know what their intentions are to you. So in the long run now, I know that he was most annoyed that I didn't tell him so that he could protect me. I went down to London. I stayed with some other people from Benin and Nigeria in a house. I called him. I agreed. And then he said, okay, well, that stage in the next week or so, we had holiday, university, and that's the best time for me. And I'll just tell my family I'm going on a trip. When I get back in a week's time, just make sure it's within a week. So he paid for my ticket. I travelled down on National Express, the bus. I went to London, met with his links, his business partners, and then stayed in the house for 2 nights, as I suppose they were preparing the tickets and all of that sort of stuff. Wasn't the best experience, there's a lot of people, I don't know what these guys do, just nothing, I suppose their job was to mind me. They had a lot of alcohol, drugs, which my mind was I want to be clear when I'm going through this. I don't want to be going into that. And also these type of men were very touchy-feely, so I suppose the women that had come through there before had such low self-esteem that they felt that they could also have sex with them and get them to drink and partake in drug-taking experiences. But for me at that time I was just no, I'm okay. I was pregnant, I was happily married, and the only reason I was doing this is to try and make some money, and I was trying not to think about all the aspects of this lifestyle which I didn't want to be a part of.
So it was a house with how many of them?
I'd say like about 4 different men came in and out. There were other men that just turned up and sat around and smoked weed or drank alcohol, and then they would just go, never really knew who they were. But obviously part of this group.
And you were there witnessing all of this?
Yeah, absolutely, because I was like their prized possession at that time. I was the person who was going to go and bring back this, and some of them were trying to be like big brothers to me and be like, give me advice and be like, you're really brave, or all part of that, I guess, grooming experience to make it feel like it's something to be proud of and something I could do. Even if there was sometimes where I'd be like, oh, I'm a bit nervous, but they're like, don't even think about it, it's fine. Just all normalizing it is absolutely cool, and just trying to get me to think. The most important thing is you don't think, because the more you think, and one guy gave an analogy to me, he's like, if I see someone walking through the airport and their head is on it, I can read it, and he said, I don't want you to be one of those people. I don't want you to be caught. I don't want you to be lost. I want you to just ride through it. So just don't even think about it. Just think you're on a holiday. So we just kept talking about a holiday, so that my mind would be set in order to be able to succeed. So on the second day, when I was meant to go, got into a taxi, and they knew the taxi driver. He was obviously part of it. He obviously took girls to the airport all the time, so they were like joking in their language to him. I was driven to the airport, and it was obviously like the longest drive of my life. And then from there, it's all you. Have my ticket, have my passport, check in, get on the flight, fly to Nigeria, and then I drove through to Benin. So that was really weird, like landing in the country I knew my husband was there. Drove to Benin, and then in Benin, I landed in a country and met a man I'd never met in my life. And yet I remember thinking before I did this, I was like, what are you doing? But I was like, oh, it's fine. Because once you're in it, you can't stop to think about those things, because you're sort of trapped. You've made this agreement, these people have spent all this money, they've made you believe they're your friends, so you feel like, I'm doing this for the team, I suppose. And those little bits that pop up, you're crazy, what are you doing? This could happen now, like you could just be raped or killed. Just be quiet. No, like they've been so great, everything's been fine. They've given me money to spend in the airport to make sure I'm okay, like they have loads of money. They don't really care if it goes wrong, or they do care, but they wouldn't do anything to me. So there was this weird power play and all this stuff going on in your mind. Met a guy, got in his car, we picked up 2 other guys, and then we drove to Benin. So crossed the border in Benin, went to a hotel, and then we just had to wait. So I was in this hotel waiting, and then it was like, no one told me anything, and that's when things really started to sort of change, like when I was in Benin. And it was like, okay, so when are we going? When's the flight? Oh, can we have your passport? We need to go and get the tickets, take my passport. Waiting in a room, no one's there. I knock on the door, they open it. They're standing outside my door. So it's very much like I felt different. I didn't feel that feeling of like camaraderie anymore, or like I was there to do a job at that stage. And no matter what these people in the UK had set me up to feel, in Benin, I was just that next girl who was doing that. And so I started to feel that from the way that these men were treating me or not treating me. And so the next thing they tell me is, we need to go and collect the food. And I was like, okay. And they'll kind of come with us. So we all got in cars and we drove to the border, because we were supposed to meet some men who were coming with the packages from the Congo. So we went to the border, we waited there. Hours later, no one turned up. I'm hearing them having phone call conversations, getting more angry. We end up driving back to the hotel. No one explains anything. We didn't meet anybody. So it turned out that the link hadn't happened. They didn't have the drugs they could send across. So there was no deal. So at that point, I called the link, this guy in the UK. And I said to him, like, what's going on? I thought I was supposed to fly by now. Like I need, my family expecting me back in the UK in like 2 or 3 days, and like I just don't understand. And I felt like, obviously not feeling very isolated and scared at this point, and then knowing that he was sort of the initial contact, I felt like he would explain everything and make me feel better. And at that point he was just like, you're on a job, what do you expect me to do? This is not a holiday, what do you expect? I'm just going to pay for you to just come back.
So he's changed now?
He just totally changed. Okay. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, look, you have 2 choices. You either wait for that connection to happen, And I was like, how long is that going to take? He's like, I don't know. What, tomorrow or next day? I don't know. Could be weeks, I don't know. Or, so in my mind, I'm like, that is definitely not happening because I need to be back. And he's like, oh, you could just do a next job. And I was like, what's the next job? He said, well, I'll just ask them to connect you and you could go tomorrow. Okay, I'll do that. You know, like I just said, just get me out of here. I just want to go. I don't want to be here anymore. So that was that. So that's when everything changed. There was no more soaking your clothes in the drugs. We're getting you a suitcase with a false back. We're going to put like a kilo of whatever crystals they put in there. And then you're going to go to Japan. Now, bearing in mind I was born in and grew up in Malaysia, I knew about how Asia has a death penalty. I was in that mind, that came in my mind, and I just felt like I had no choice. It was like, wait here for weeks, potentially never fly back, have to tell my family where I was or make more lies, which was just impossible. Tell my family where I was, which was just impossible. I was like, there must be a way out, or go on this job and pray to God that I get through and I can go home. And so I just agreed, and at that point I didn't want to be there. I was upset, I was scared, and at that point I called my husband because I just thought that's the only thing I can do. And so I called him, and he was just obviously like in another world of like, what is going on, where are you? And he just wanted to know exactly where I was, and he said, I'm coming now. I think I called him about 12, and they obviously heard me on the phone because, you know, they heard me speaking to the link and I agreed. And then they heard me talking to this next person. They came in and they were like interrogating me, like, who's this person you're talking to? Why are you inviting someone here? Like, are you going to steal our drugs? And at that point, they were basically threatening me, saying, like, you know, we have your passport, we can just take you and drop you on the side of the road and you'll be used as a prostitute here. Just all manners of threats became coming in, you know, give me the number, who's this person? And I was just like, look, I'm just a student, like, from the UK, and I just came to this job, and now everything's changing.
You crying a lot?
And yeah, a lot of crying. I'm really scared. And then they were just like, look, we've booked the flight. You're leaving this hotel at 3, you're getting on the plane at 4, and that's it. And they just wanted to know my clothes size because they were going to fill this suitcase with a bunch of clothes they'd bought so it could just look more normal. And so by 3, left. They took my phone as well at that point, so I couldn't then call my husband back. I ended up going to the airport, you know, going through customs. What did seem true is that they knew all the customs officers, so they probably did easily pay off the Benin airport. They seemed to all know each other. You know, the bag, I wasn't supposed to take it through. It would be on the plane. That's what I was told, you know. So again, they obviously knew people to just put it on the plane. Went through, got on the plane, and then flew to Japan. Non-stop flight. They told me, you must eat, make sure you eat, make sure you drink, behave normally. And when you get off, just collect the bag, leave. And they gave me a phone and they said it would ring when I landed. So I had no way to contact them, I had no money, I had nothing, just knew that the phone would ring when I got out. And I knew my husband was on his way to that hotel, and I knew that they were expecting him. So I knew at that stage that he would probably, I don't know, like the worst things were in my mind of what would happen to him, because they just thought he was someone who was in part of a conspiracy with me to steal their drugs. So I landed in Japan, and I really wanted to just not collect the bag. I wanted to just leave the airport because I was still a free, normal person. I hadn't touched the bag. I wasn't really involved in my mind. I was like, I can just go now. But I just thought about my husband, and I just thought, you know, God is good, and just let me collect this, go, leave. I'll never do anything like this again. You know, I was making all these prayers and all these commitments and pledges, and I walked through and I got stopped at customs, and they were like, you know, can we look through your bag? They took it, they scanned it, they brought me to the back, and they were like, what's this? And then where they scanned it, there was like this grey patch in the middle. It was like so obvious, do you know what I mean? And I found out later in my trial that that was a very well-known drug mule bag, you know, because it had a false back, like this one particular make, this brand that no one really uses anymore. So it was like a red herring that the guy knew as soon as he saw me that, you know, that's exactly what I was doing.
So you got off the plane, you went through immigration. Did they ask you anything?
I went through nothing. You have nothing to declare or something to declare. I went through nothing to declare. And, you know, just asked you to put your bag up. And this is Japan. It's extremely meticulous. They check everything. It's not like some countries where you just walk through. But yeah, I think as soon as they saw my bag, the guy was asking me loads of questions like, where have you come from, where are you going, what are you doing here, all things that would be used against me in my trial. And yeah, then just asked me to go to the back and please look at my bag. And then that's when it all changed, because they were like, what's this, no, what's this? I'm like, a pane of glass, I don't know, what is it, a backing? And then that's when I was taken into a room. They put handcuffs on me and sort of just interrogated me for about 3 hours, and then arrested me and formally took me to the police station.
Now, how were they? Were they very firm, very, say, rough?
Different culture, so very, there's that culture shock. They do things completely differently. Like, I wasn't allowed to speak to a lawyer. Like, I had to speak, everything was in it. I spoke in English, but there was a translator, so everything was in Japanese. I didn't really understand what really was being written down, what was being said. I think at that point, I was in shock, so there was this adrenaline pumping through me, like heightened state of like, oh my God, this is not happening, but yet slightly calm as well, because it's just this weird, this fight or flight feeling going through you. And just trying to have to come up with a story on the spot there to these people who are trying to find out where I'm going, and all the while they're there unpacking my bag, taking it apart, taking photos, and I'm watching slowly as they get towards this bag that obviously I'd never seen this bag before, I'd never seen what was in it. I'm trying to make up a story about how I'm just coming on holiday. And then they get to the packet of drugs, they open it, they're testing it there, it's a completely different culture to here where that would go. So I saw all of it, and they were, at that point I knew there was drugs there. I knew, all that was fact in my mind because I'd seen it right there in front of me. But yeah, extremely scary, but I'd been through a lot of scary situations before and just brought out this inability to just get through it.
But you knew that time the Jeep was up.
Yeah, and I remember being driven to the police station, and I just thought, if I'd got 4 years, I could do that. I remember trying to pep myself up, 4 years. I could do 4 years here, looking out the window I could do 4 years. Because it's just such a surreal experience. It was just sort of, even my time in prison, I felt like I was very much an observer. I felt like I was part of a science experiment, because it never really sunk in that I was in prison, in a foreign country, going through all these things. I just felt like this is not a joke, but this is just something I've signed up to do, right? A social experiment. It didn't ever really dawn on me, I think, until I actually was sentenced. So from that point of being driven to the police station, I spent 6 weeks in the police station in a cell, and that was just in a room with a rag. So I slept on a rag. It was a really extremely brutal regime. Wasn't able to talk to anyone, was in isolation. Spent the first 2 weeks being interrogated. So would be brought into a room, would be handcuffed to the table. I was 6 months pregnant at that time, and I'd just spend from 7 a.m. until about 5-6 p.m. being interrogated by 2 police officers. I was not allowed to speak to a solicitor, I was not allowed to make any phone calls, and I had an interpreter with me, and all they were trying to do is get a story out for me. And over 2 weeks, every aspect of my travel, this, that, and this story I'd produced, that I was going on holiday, and my connection was from Benin to Japan. And I said the only thing I could think of is that I had a different bag, which is true. When I went to Benin, I had my own bag, and I said when I crossed the border, it got ripped. So I asked for someone to get me a new bag. They got me a new bag, which is this bag. So the story I came up with to try and get myself through was that the bag was swapped out, and maybe somebody else had put drugs in there. And they were, obviously they were just saying, this is ridiculous. Why would somebody risk putting drugs in there and you didn't know? And I was just trying to think, well, that seems like the best way, because I wouldn't know about being nervous in the airport. I was trying to use everything I'd learned to try and find my way out. But in Japan, there's a 99.9% conviction rate. So even that in itself, people are encouraged to say that they're guilty even though they're not. So there are probably a lot more people in prison in Japan who are innocent and who say they're guilty, because that's the best way to get through a system like that. An honour-based system is to just have a lot of humility and say, yes, I'm really sorry, and then you can move on. It's the opposite. If you go and say, no, I didn't do it, I think the prosecution go harder for you. I was a foreigner, they wanted to make an example out of me, trying to, use their system and make them look like fools.
Yes, folks. So If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency. I know some of you joined us late, but let's have that conversation while you're listening. Tell us what you think. How's the journey going for you so far? You heard the foundation. You heard when the trap was laid. We're dealing with the act that means the purpose of human trafficking. So she's now arrested in Japan. And just a reminder to some of you, Japan, Chinese, anywhere around
in Asia,
they don't play. Don't expect good treatment. Pregnant or not, they deal with you harsh. Let's continue CJ's journey. Thank you for those of you joined us on Facebook and YouTube, and of course listening to us on 95.5 FM. Those of you listening to us overseas, thank you so much for joining us. Let's have the conversation while we listen. Let's go back to CJ's story.
So after the 6 weeks in a police cell, I was taken to a remand centre, and I spent almost 9 months in solitary confinement. And that meant staying in a cell 24 hours a day, only leaving the cell twice a week for 15 minutes to go and have a shower. Other than that, you were just in your cell.
Did you not receive any treatment, or did a doctor see you since you were pregnant?
They were good in that sense, in that they allowed me to go to the hospital once a month and have a checkup, a scan. I ended up having my baby in the hospital. Even that was an extremely difficult experience, because in Japan there's a class system, and if you're in prison you're like the lowest class, and as a female as well. So we weren't allowed to look at the officers in the eyes. You had to look down. You were a number, you were not a name. You didn't speak. They expected me to speak Japanese, so I learned Japanese in my time in remand because they wouldn't speak English to me. The system was very brutal. They restricted your letters. There was no phone calls. Your family could come and see you, but only for 15 minutes behind a glass, and you had to have an interpreter with like a police officer in the room writing everything down. So by that point, I think I was just the shell of myself. I was just trying to survive, get through it. And when I got taken to the hospital when I was in labour, because it was literally like just before I was going to have my daughter, they took me into like a surgical room. They lay you on a metal like table, and they still have stirrups in Japan. I was just stripped completely naked. I was handcuffed to the table, and I had my baby in front of officers, in front of the hospital staff. And I think by that point, I wasn't humiliated, because I was so used to that kind of treatment. I was used to just not being a person. I had my daughter. She was taken away from me straight away. Initially I found that really hard, but I just sort of prayed about it, and the following day I just had this realization that the reason that this is happening is so that she doesn't bond with you and you don't bond with her, and it's going to be easier because you're going to be here a long time.
So basically she's Japanese then?
Well, she was born in Japan. They considered her an alien because I had overstayed, so she was obviously not going to get Japanese nationality. The British Embassy knew about my situation, and when she was born, my solicitor told my family and came to Japan. And after 3 days of being in hospital, I was returned to prison, and she stayed in the hospital. During that time, they didn't want me to see her at all. I had to get my solicitor to and the British Embassy to argue that there is some importance that she sees me. And they said, okay, the only thing they're going to allow her to do is have 20 minutes a day of breastfeeding. That was the only way I could see her. So I saw her for 20 minutes over 3 days, and I went back to prison. And then she stayed in the hospital for 5 days as my mum came, and they vetted her and did all these things, and then she could take my daughter. And then she remained in Japan for a month in order to be able to get my daughter British citizenship, so she could end up taking her out of Japan. So I think, obviously from my parents' perspective, not knowing anything, thinking, I was a really good child, had a really good upbringing in their eyes, which I did, went to a good university, had all the resources I could have needed, never asked for help, to find out I'm suddenly in Japan.
Who made that call? They did?
So I assume the embassy did, because the only people who came to see me initially was just somebody from the consulate who said, look, we've been notified that you're here. Is anyone you want us to let know? And at that point, I just literally said my husband, because I thought maybe, again, with God's grace, all of this could end and I could just go home and my family would never have to find out. It turned out for 2 weeks that the embassy couldn't reach my husband. And then finally on the third week they reached him, and then he obviously said, look, like, I need to tell her parents and all this sort of stuff. But like, I now know that he spent 3 weeks being locked in the basement by these people who'd asked me to come, because they thought that I'd gone missing. Like, they'd obviously tried to phone my phone, there's no answer, and so they kept him there saying, where's your wife, where's your wife?
So he showed up at the hotel when you left, and
he showed up. So they basically like locked him in a room and kept him there, and he tried to, you know, reason his way out, like, come on, brother, like, you know, I'm just her husband, I want to make sure she's okay, like. But they were not having any of it, and they ended up taking him back to a location where they were based, I suppose. He didn't know. They blindfolded him, they took him to a place, and they kept him. All he knows is at the basement, because they came down the stairs when they wanted to come and give him like bread or water, and then he was just kept there for almost 3 weeks, because they wanted to make sure that there was no way that me and him had planned to steal their drugs and go. They wanted to be sure that I was actually arrested by the police. So I had my daughter, went back to prison. 4 months later, I had my trial. I was sentenced and given 9.5 years in prison. And in Japan, you also get a fine. So I was given 4.5 million yen fine for the drugs I was carrying, which equates to £45,000. And if you don't pay it, you have to work that money off. So in Japan, you work in a factory. Obviously, that would have added like 3 years to my sentence, and my parents and me, but really it was on my parents, because they had the resources. They didn't want my daughter to spend another 3 years away from me, so they like remortgaged their house and used their pension and paid that, so that when I started my sentence, they said it was like a third. If you did a third of your sentence, you'd be eligible to be transferred back to the UK because of the prison transfer agreement. And they wanted me to just have a fair chance of having that as soon as possible, rather than coming back here 10 years later to a 10-year-old who didn't know me and didn't want to know me. And my husband really wanted to raise my daughter, so that was really tough, because he was writing to me, can they send the child to me? And also we both knew like the quality of life would be so much better if she remained in the UK. So after a long time, he gave in to that. And my mum, she had only just moved to the UK to sort of get separation at the time from my dad, but obviously they put all that aside and just focused on raising my daughter, getting me through Japan prison. I spent 3 years in prison there, and it was really tough because, again, you know, you have to know the language. You're not allowed to look people in the eyes. It's not like the UK where you have opportunities to grow and change in prison and rehabilitate. There, it's just all punishment. So you work in a factory, you're not allowed to talk. So I could only talk for 10 minutes a day, 4 times a week. When we went outside and had recreation, which is a time when you could do exercise, everything else was controlled. The way you walked, you know, the food you ate, the way you slept, the way you maintained your room. You have 5 minutes to wash your face in the morning. You only shower twice a week, and then you all shower together in a hall, like a big hall where you all just go in and sit down by a tap, shower, and then you go. So really, like, you're a shell of yourself. You're ripped, brought down to a level where they feel that that's enough of an experience that you'll never do those things again. And for me, absolutely it was. From the minute I was sentenced, like, I was never going to do those things again. But for a lot of people I was in prison with in Japan, it was really sad because they were drug addicts. So in Japan, you go to prison for taking drugs. It's not seen as like in the UK, you go to a hospital or a rehab clinic. So there were a lot of girls and women in there who were just prostitutes, or, you know, they just got hooked on, what was big over there was methamphetamines, crystal meth, which fortunately is not prevalent in the UK. But they would just be caught taking drugs and would come and do 2-3 year sentences. And they'd just always be like, what? You don't go to prison in the UK for taking drugs? And I was like, no, like, it's not seen as that.
What were the drugs that you were carrying?
I think it was amphetamine. So obviously, again, it's something I didn't ask when I was doing it. But afterwards, when I was indicted, I found out it was amphetamine. So I guess a similar strand as speed. Maybe originally it was something different, but they knew that that could sell in Japan, so that's what it was.
Did you know if the type of drug makes any difference on the sentence?
Yeah, they said things like, you know, the purity, the amount. I know that matters in the UK. I know that in the UK, things like whether you've done it before, your age, all those things factor. But when you're doing things in another country, it's by their rules. I just knew they wanted to make an example out of me and I suppose give me the most time, because they were also really, for the Japanese, they felt that they said they thought that I was involved and they thought that I knew the person. And as I said, that I was traveling with my husband, but he ended up not coming. They thought my husband was involved with all of this, and they said that they gave me more time because I wouldn't give up his identity, and I wouldn't. So they felt like I was trying to cover up for him as well. So yeah, there are a lot more factors involved that were just out of my control. I think in hindsight, obviously, I should have just been like guilty for the beginning, and I might have got 2 or 3 years less. Still would have probably got about 6 or 7.
When the time came for you to be released, how did that go?
Japan, again, it's a culture where you don't get to know anything. So until the day I left, I had no idea I was going. I just praying every day I would go. And then just one day when I was working in the factory, they came and said to me, oh, you need to come outside. There's a message for you, which they say to anyone. So you don't, again, it's to not allow anyone to know. And that was the last time I ever set foot in that factory. I left, never saw those people again.
What type of factory was it?
Just making garments. So they had like 9 factories, 80 women in each factory. And in your first 2 weeks, you were assessed in a training factory as to your ability to do manual labor, in your ability to listen to instructions. So the training factory, every person was given 50 strings, and you had to tie every string up into a knot and then show the sensei, which is the teacher, which is the officer, and then you have to untie them. And you did that all day, sat on a stool, not allowed to talk, not allowed to look up. And that was a way, like, for 2 weeks. I think that was hell on earth, because you just want to like scream, you feel humiliated, you have to use the resources of your mind to get through that day, because you knew what you were doing is futile, was pointless. But what it was is them monitoring us. Are you going to do what we say? Some people just couldn't do it. They'd want to talk, they'd be shouted at. They want to move, they'd be shouted at. And they were put in different factories. So I was put in a factory where I suppose the work required somebody to be able to do those things without causing issues. And so I worked in a factory where they created like sports t-shirts and shorts. And again, you start off at the bottom and you work your way up. As you do well, you get to move on. And I think at the most senior of my time there, I was just doing like a corner piece of a shirt, and you'd be given like 500 and you'd just sew the same piece, and then it'd be done. You tie it up, put your hand up, someone comes to take it, they give you a new one, and then you just do that same thing. There's no variety, there's no, at least for me, I could take pride in doing it right, but it was just part of a assembly line. And even your life there was controlled. So they controlled when you went to the toilet. They'd set a time, and it'd be your row's time to go to the toilet. You come back, you can't go to the toilet any other time. You'd then have a tea break, 5 minutes in the morning. You'd go and have your tea break, you come back. This is all in complete silence. Then you'd have lunch break, we'd stand up, we'd be counted, we'd march, we'd sit down, we'd have lunch in a huge hall with all these other women. No one looked at each other, no one spoke. It was completely regimented, controlled. You go back, you continue, and it was like that all day. The only breaks you'd have would be tea, your toilet break, and then twice a week in your factory you'd go and have a shower. And then all weekend you were locked up from Friday afternoon till Monday morning. You were locked in your cell, and you'd have to follow the regime of being in your cell at that time.
So when you left Japan and you came back to serve the rest of your sentence, tell us about it.
Yeah, so I did 3 years here and felt so blessed to be able to come back to this country. I was able to start a degree in prison. You can do a degree through the Open University, so I just thought I need to at least show myself and my daughter that you can succeed in what you started out doing. So I started a law degree, and 4 years later I'm in the last 8 months of it, and I'm actually on a distinction, so doing a lot better than I probably ever would have done at university with all the things going on. So coming to the UK was just amazing, because you just were treated like a human being. I remember being brought back to the UK and I couldn't speak I was looking down. Every time they'd ask me a question, I'd say hi, which is yes in Japanese. And the officers were British, and they were like, call me by my name, look at me, you don't need to speak Japanese, it's okay, like constantly trying to reassure me. Took the handcuffs off, and even the Japanese had a problem with that. They were like, what are you doing? She's still, and they were like, no, she's in our custody now. And they knew, like, they were saying to me, like, we understand that if we felt like you were a threat, we would put handcuffs on you, but we understand that you're not that kind of prisoner. And so they just let me walk with them to the airplane, sit in between them and just be free, I suppose, and even just try to have normal conversation. And it was crazy because I hadn't spoken for 3 years properly. I'd lost the ability to do that. So I remember speaking, and then I felt the words were racing in my mind, and I can't say anymore because I couldn't catch the words I wanted to say, and it was so overwhelming. And I just remember sometimes just saying, and they were like, no, it's fine, we get it. And they were like, to be honest, you're the most sane person we've met out of this, because we come to Japan a lot. And he said the majority of people, we take them straight to the hospital, mental institution, because they need to have a lot of work to be okay again. Yeah, so that was amazing, taking the flight back, having choice, like the air hostess coming to say, what drink do you want? I couldn't decide what drink because I hadn't been given choice for 3 years. Orange juice. In the end, I said, can I have it all? So I had orange juice, water, milk. And I was drinking it, and they were like, what, lunch, what do you want? I'd had it all because I hadn't had that kind of food. I hadn't had choice. I hadn't had anything. I hadn't had chocolate or sweets for 3 years. So when they came, it's like the air hostesses knew who we were. They were so kind to me, and they would come and bring me chocolate. And I remember just eating so much chocolate that I was sick because I'd not had all of that and all these experiences. I was supposed to sleep in the flight. I didn't. I watched all the shows. I was like connecting back to society, watching like, Grammy Awards. Oh my God, who are these people? Everything. Got back to the UK, took a bus. They took me off the plane by not going through the airport, but just getting onto a bus on the tarmac. Drove straight to Holloway Prison. By that point, I was overwhelmed, I was nauseous, I was sick. I'd been up for like 24 hours. I was in a whole other world. I couldn't even talk by that point. And they just booked me in. I went to the first night centre. Again, so much more humane, just like you had other inmates who would sort of look after you, explain like the prison system, what's going to happen in induction, talk to you like, do you have drug issues? Because they're trying to assess which wing you should go on if you need help with drug addiction. And I remember just going to the officer and saying like, can I shower? And then they were like, looked at me, yes, please don't ever ask us. And they would like make a joke out of it. And I remember just feeling a bit more normal because that's what British people do. They, there's irony, there's jokes, there's laughing, there's taking the piss out of someone. And I was just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm here now and I can do that. But I was so conditioned into asking and to not expect things or to look down. It took weeks, months to be able to get to a point where I could talk, where I could look people in the eye, where, I was emaciated. I was the shell of myself, like when I went to Japan, I think I was like 125 kilos or something. And when I came back, I was 72 kilos. I'm a very tall girl, and I was just, when my family saw me, they were just shocked. I was almost yellow because I looked like I had jaundice. Yeah, it just took time to acclimatise and become normal again and understand, you're not in that system anymore. So for me, like everyone else complained about the British prison, they were unhappy. It was a horrendous experience, but for me, it was the best. And obviously that, unfortunately, you start to get complacent. So after about a year, and I got moved to another prison, I started to feel like forget, I suppose, Japan, and start to feel like, oh God, prison here is terrible. But when you remember what you go through, then obviously there are two different types of systems. But the British prisons have many of their own issues. Fortunately, in the UK, as a woman, you're more likely to get a job in prison and get education and be out of your cell, whereas if you're a man, unfortunately, there's so much more. There's overcrowding. You're going to have 2 or 3 people in your cell. You're less likely to leave your cell for 23 hours a day. So very much more inhumane, less opportunities. So I was really fortunate in the UK. In my final 2 years, I was eligible because my risk was low. I was obedient. Obviously, I wasn't like some other people in prison who were just rebelling against.
You just described what sounds like a pretty harrowing experience, all in all. Is there anything positive that you've taken out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it is part of making me, because even though I'd made some really, really bad choices, it allowed me to address the issues of my childhood that, obviously I could have addressed in much better ways. And it also made me realise what's the most important things in life. And I suppose I'm slightly grateful to it, because I would have just continued making bad choices if I hadn't been caught then. Who knows what risks I would have then gone on to take. At least going to prison, I wasn't dead. I hadn't been raped. All the other things that could have happened along that journey didn't happen. I'm still with my husband. I now know my daughter and I look after her and she lives with me. So from everything, I have a lot to thank my family for. And I suppose for me, that was the strangest thing, going through prison, knowing that maybe a lot of the reasons I was doing those things, I had a lot of resentment from my parents. They were the only people really who, at the end of the day, came to my help. So I learned a big lesson about, like, your parents are humans just like you. They make mistakes, they're not God. So I came to forgive them in my time in prison, and I have a lot of gratitude to them for everything they gave up to help me. And I've sort of just forgotten the past, because I know actually they just made bad choices and didn't handle things well and didn't know really the knock-on effect on me or my sister. So I guess at the end of the day, when I talk to young people now, I just say, blood is thicker than water. Make sure no matter what's going on, just give your parents the benefit of the doubt. Tell them they were kids once, and just know that at the end of the day, when you're in prison, the only people who come to see you are your family. All those people you had as friends and all that, they fall by the wayside after years of being inside. I think that was the biggest realization, is just seeing my parents for who they were despite their flaws. That they, especially like now knowing my daughter, my mom did such a great job raising her, because obviously the alcoholism didn't go away, it only got worse when I was in prison, but she still did right by my daughter.
Yes, so much things to unpack here. So many things to unpack here, folks.
It's a shame we don't have the time.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and this one is for the parents who have children in university or who tend to send them off there. This program this morning, there's so many things that happened to this child here, so many things to discuss. But she was literally trafficked.
Yes.
In Japan, that was forced labor. But
Correct.
that's what you do. When you're there, you take what you get.
Yep.
They don't play in these countries, and
they're brutal. It's brutal.
They're very brutal. But the underlying issue here is, look at the difference in money. CJ was about a couple £1,000 in debt.
Yeah.
Didn't want to let the parent know. Parent now had to find 47K.
To help her while she was in prison, plus take care of her daughter.
Yes.
And, do all the needful, travel to Japan to get her, and, a lot of expense, a lot more expense than she was expecting to receive.
Than if she had just said, Mommy, Daddy,
I need help.
And just so it speaks to your relationship with your child here this morning.
Yes.
Would they be afraid to come to you if they find themselves in this and risk their life to do something else to get that money, just to show you, I don't need you?
Yes.
What do you think, folks?
For those options.
Brian Patterson on YouTube, thank you very much for looking out for us. Please remember, folks, when you're there, to like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us.
Yes, please.
In going forward. Also, same thing on Facebook. And those of you who are listening on radio, thank you very much for joining us as usual. £2,000 to £47,000. See the big difference? All she had to do was reach out to the parent and say, but no family involved. Although she tried to hit. But after this break, we want you to hear what happened to the husband. And like I said when we interviewed her, if I was that man, if Natasha did that to me, I don't think I would be able to be forgiven for that. But you'll hear for yourself.
Also the mother, because the mother, she has mentioned several times, is an alcoholic still. And clearly they had some issues with her husband even, because she will talk about the fact that the father of the child wanted to keep the child, and the parents said nope, that's not happening. So there's a lot of family dynamics, and as she will explain it, a lot of family dynamics that needed to be addressed so that they could go forward.
You have the conversation with us on Facebook or YouTube while we listen to see the end of CJ's story. And it just goes to show you, too, the relationship between customs, immigration, and people who transport and traffic drugs.
Yep.
You heard that for yourself from her.
And this is all around the world, not just in Trinidad and Tobago or the Caribbean, all around the world.
End up in Japan, they said, you came here, we didn't invite you, you learn the language. Try to understand what we're saying. And knowing that they didn't speak for 3 years without saying a word.
Yep.
Listen, it's not worth it, folks.
Brutal. And yet only get 2 baths a week, 2 showers a week?
Yeah.
What's the reason for that?
All that's part of that's all part of the punishment with
that's
them.
harsh, boy.
Very brutal. And then they traffic them too as well.
And then how she gave birth, I mean, oh God. And just undignified.
So after this break, you'll hear what happened to the husband and are they still together? We'll find out when we return with CJ's story right here on Dependency. We'll be back.
Slavery, a terrible time in our history. The kidnapping, buying and selling of people for profit, the exploitation of another human being. It still exists today. It has a new name: human trafficking. Anyone can be a victim. There is forced labor, sexual exploitation, and domestic servitude. Human trafficking is a worldwide problem and an emerging concern for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. If you know of or suspect human trafficking activity, call the counter-trafficking hotline at 800-4CTU or 800-4288. Human trafficking is a crime. Identify it, report it, stop it. A message from the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security.
Okay, so folks, let's go straight to CJ now, and as she ran down the rekindling and the reigniting and reknitting of the family, starting with her husband. Your husband, that guy has to be really understanding and supportive.
Absolutely.
Did he tell you what went through his mind and the experience he had in there?
He's actually someone who is very positive, and I think that's where I've learned a lot of my positivity from is from him. And someone who, he'll never tell me how hard things are for him. He believes it's important to speak your future and be strong. So knowing that he's a man like that, he would never really want me to know the truth of how difficult it was. But slowly over the years, got him to explain the things that had happened, even though he was like, no, it was fine. He was starving. He was in complete darkness. He had no phone, no ability to contact the outside world. Often I say to him that it's worse than what I went through. It was more disconcerting. He just had no idea what was happening, and they would come down and attack him sometimes and try and force information out of him, which he didn't have. He didn't even know what I was doing, where I was going, which they found really hard to believe. They were like, if it's your wife, why wouldn't you know all this stuff? And you're a Nigerian, surely you're involved in all this stuff. Who do you work for? What area are you from? And he's even suffered consequences as a result of that. So about 6 months ago, he bumped into some people who were connected with those people, and they just beat him up and they broke his wrist. So now he's been really suffering the last few months, trying to set his wrist back. He was in a cast for about 3 months. So yeah, it never really sort of leaves you. I'm fortunate that they released him and he's alive. We have an amazing relationship that has got me through to this point, and we still live apart, and we're working on his visa at the moment, so at least he can live with us and be a part of my daughter's and his daughter's life. Because obviously during that whole time, his world just collapsed. He had all these ambitions and ideas that he would be a father and he would be around when she was born, and he'd raise her and he'd be with me and we'd all live together. And then I was in a country where he couldn't contact me because they believed he was part of this. He had to go through my parents, who were angry at him and believed he must have been involved in this, so they blamed him. So they've never really allowed him to have contact. And it was only really until I was released and I took over care of my daughter, I could make those decisions and I could, allow them to be connected. I could bring her to see his family in the UK and do that. But there's still huge tensions in my family. Those same issues from the beginning, you don't talk about issues, they still continue now. So all the time I was in prison, we never spoke about what happened, and they just made assumptions, which obviously the police made, which came out of my trial. And to this day, they still just don't want to know anything about him or his family, even though they've never been involved. I think my mum's prejudiced because of her history growing up, never to go to Nigeria or talk to Nigerians because they're bad people. She obviously just now thinks, right, this is exactly why. And, obviously that's still to come in my life, and I hope that they'll see over time with him being here and being a good father and all the things I know he is, that they'll come to see that, maybe it's not that way and we can talk about it. And my mother's still going through a lot of issues at the moment with alcohol. My father's officially separated from her, but she won't accept it. My mum sort of blames me for my dad leaving her, and I know that she knows that that's not true, but at the moment it's the most convenient way. And when you're still drinking a lot, again, we still haven't really even dealt with the issue of alcoholism. You're going to make any excuse to make things easier. But every night she still drinks. And the last year I've been going through counselling initially it was to deal with Japan, but all I talk about is my relationship with my mother, which obviously is the stem of all of this stuff. But yeah, at some point we have to stop colluding and we just have to sit down. Your actions have consequences, you can't continue doing this. But it's so hard to do that when I know she's a good person, she's raised my daughter. There's all these issues that are connecting and it's great that I have my husband, because he helps me to see things in that outside party. When you think, oh well, I'm bound up by all these things, he's telling me, look, if you want to have a better relationship, you have to be honest with her, you have to tell her about the truth, and it's not going to be nice, but you owe that to her, and I need to stop being a child in that relationship and be an adult. So I'm just still learning all of those things at the moment, and then also try and be a good mother to my daughter and not make the same mistakes, and also pull her out of the things she's seen with my mum, that maybe I've already seen things in her that I knew about myself. She's extremely caring, and so if she sees someone crying, she'll run up to them, because my mum's always crying, and become that carer, and I don't want her to really grow up being like that, because she's seeking affection already and attention, and I want to just give her all of that so she can feel safe and loved at home and not seek that outside, which is what, again, part of the roots of why I did what I did.
Tell us now about your life post-prison. When you were released from prison here, what was your plan and how did you go about it?
So my family thought when I was released from prison that all I could do is work in Sainsbury's. My mum said, even if I have to set up a shop and you just work in the shop because no one will hire you, that's what we'll do, So there was this idea that prisoners would never have a life after prison. But I came to realise, especially in the UK prison, the opportunities that are available to you, just grab them. I was doing my degree, I took up loads of courses, and when I had the opportunity to have ROTL, release on temporary licence, which you're allowed to be released from the prison and you can do a year of voluntary work and then a year of paid work, I just grabbed it. I did the courses I needed to do, went to the interviews, and I started work as a voluntary in a charity that works with anyone touched by prison, so family members, prisoners, and I worked in a contact centre first, giving advice and guidance over the phone to family members of prisoners who'd call in, where am I going to live when I get out? We'd have a database and we'd help answer their questions. After a year, a job became available to sort of lead a team of facilitators who went into school and shared their experience and helped deter young people and expose the reality of crime. And I didn't go for it because, again, I didn't have that confidence, why could I do it? And they went through the interviews. I remember the manager coming to me and saying, afterwards, why didn't you go for it? I was like, okay, I didn't even know he knew me, and he's like, no, I've seen you, come to some of our talks and talk, and you're really eloquent, and I think you'd be amazing. That's all I can say, but put your hat in the ring. And I did that, and I got the job, and so for that final year that I was in prison, I was able to earn some money. In the UK, the prison take 40%, you pay your taxes, and then the rest of the money you can send home, pay your travel, pay for your food. So it wasn't a way to get rich, but it was just a way to give back to my family a bit and also to feel valued. I remember the first day I did paid work, I was in heaven. I just felt wow, people are actually valuing what I do. And then I had that freedom, because I think it's so important when you've done a long sentence to have that ability to test yourself in the community and then go back rather than just be released 6 years later. So I spent those 2 years normalising, getting that job all the time, leaving prison at 6 a.m, coming back 6 p.m, following the rules, regulations, all of those stuff. Still doing my degree, so I'd wake up at 4 a.m, study, go to work, come back, study, go to sleep, When I was released, I was really fortunate I could continue with that job. I was homeless because I was not going to go back and live in the house with my mum and, go be involved in all of that stuff again. And there's a lot of overcrowding in London, not many places to stay. So my council, my borough, put me in a 1-bedroom flat in Gillingham in Kent. So that was like about 2 hours from my daughter, from my work, and I stayed there for 6 months. Again, I was very grateful just to have what I have, because there were so many other people who, I only had that place because I was in priority need, because I had a child, but there were lots of people who just lived on the street because they, their borough didn't have somewhere for them to go. And that was really tough for me, was seeing people from the same borough as me living on the street in the freezing cold and just going back into addiction and then going back to prison, because prison was safe, prison had warmth, had food, had all these things. So it was just a real eye-opener for me and kind of propelled me into more of what I'm doing now and where I want to go with my career and my life. I don't want prison to break people and make them further offend. I would love it to be a place where we nurture people who are already broken to be able to make the decisions you do and push you on to a better place. And right now we're not quite there, so as great as the UK is, our prison system is really in disarray and could be doing so much more. So yeah, that's where I am now, close to finishing my degree, probably going to go into being a lawyer for a bit.
Some more of the advice that she shared at the beginning. But yeah, this was a really wild ride. This story, we've been sitting on it for a while, but I'm glad that we had the chance to share it with you today. And of course, if you need to listen to it again, you can always go back to the live.
Before we may have time for some couple calls. However, we hope you all were taking notes. We hope you all learned something. Mm-hmm. But we have something else to add to this education this morning. Since there was discussion of gambling.
Yes.
That trip we made to the UK, we also met with a group called GamCare, and they work in conjunction with the lottery board in the UK, side by side, because the lottery board folks confident enough to know that they're not going to lose money if they help the lost souls. So they continue to support them, and we appreciate them for that greatly. But for those of you here still struggling with your gambling and any other addiction, but let's look at a short story on Joe and his gambling addiction, and then what is gambling addiction. You'll hear both, and then we return to wrap up here this morning, this edition of Our Dependency.
I remember times going into the bookies and saying to myself, I'm not going to do this. And I'd be in the bookies arguing with myself. And then before I knew it, I'd put money into the machine. During university, it was always just about the thrill. But I'd always find myself drawn back to going into the bookies and gambling. And just started to get myself more and more into debt. It sort of spiraled on from then. I was gambling heavily. I'd got into gambling online as well. And then I met my now wife, and I thought, right, I need to stop this. And I did for a period of time. I remember getting to that point where I was thinking, we're comfortable, we've got the house, we're paying the mortgage. If I have the odd bet here and there, it's not going to matter too much. And it just got heavier and heavier and heavier. I ended up winning 10 grand, and I thought, it's amazing, I can pay off most of my debts and get to that point where I will stop. So I cleared all the payday loans, some of the credit card, but I'll always remember I kept back about £1.5 to continue gambling on this website, and went through that within a week. Before I knew it, I'd got myself into about 25 grand's worth of debt. I thought, right, I have to stop, and the only way I'm going to stop is if the wife knows. I sent her a text message to basically come clean. She said that she wanted me to go to GA and to sort my life out, otherwise that was going to be it. The whole going to GA was more helpful than anything I could actually imagine. I just felt an instant connection that I knew that I was going to be able to talk to these people about the way I've been in life, and it was a comforting place to be. Since stopping gambling, my life's changed for the better. I feel more comfortable in myself and I have a better perspective. I think the Northern Gambling Clinic's going to be great for people to have a place that you can now go and talk openly about it. If you're the sort of person that gets that common urge to go and have a bet and you can't explain why, the best thing to do is to open up and go and talk to someone and help change your life around it.
Millions of individuals engage in gambling activities every day for entertainment and recreation. Most gamblers are able to do so without experiencing any serious consequences. However, according to recent studies, up to 1% of people develop gambling addiction, also known as gambling disorder. Gambling disorder is more than just a love for the thrill of the game. It can take over a person's life, leading to financial problems, damaged relationships, and emotional distress. Warning signs of compulsive gambling include neglecting responsibilities, hiding the gambling behavior, and increasing the amount of time and money spent on it. Gambling activates the same reward centers in the brain as drugs and alcohol. Even when they know it's harmful to themselves and their loved ones, people with gambling disorder continue to gamble. However, recovery is possible. With the right support and treatment, people with gambling disorder can recover and reclaim their lives. They can rebuild relationships, regain financial stability, and find joy and peace again. If you or someone you know is struggling with compulsive gambling, remember that you are not alone. Reach out for support and take the first step towards a better future. For more information about treatment and recovery paths, please visit www.psychiatry.org.
All right. Thank you for staying with us. Folks, listen, I'm looking into the camera now. I hope you learned something here this morning. I hope you all understand how important it is for that foundation to be strong. This is why most of us fell through the cracks, because you ever thought about there are people who go to university or they join any arm of the protective service, they do everything almost to the letter and they leave in good graces. People leave here, they go to university, they return with all their accreditation and all of these things, because some of us just built different. Recruit training, like I always said, cannot change DNA and predisposition. You could do what you want. And it's the same thing with how CJ grew up. Dysfunctional home leads to dysfunctional lives and dysfunctional people and low self-esteem people. It's a pity though that what we're doing here is crime fighting, right?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, prevention.
We hear corporate Trinidad and Tobago and some state agencies and private sector bemoan the fact that what the government doing and what, well, this is one thing that Ministry of National Security doing. But you all would not believe if I could include disrespect and disregard after 24 years of our independency, what we experience with people. So sometimes I ask myself the question, are some people really aggrieved at this type of programming? Because you would not believe the people who would shut their doors on us as we continue to try to educate you. Doing this is not easy. And when the Prime Minister say all hands on deck, corporate Trinidad and Tobago stated, you are part of that too. So that we could continue. Look at Tobago. It breaks our heart every time we hear about Tobago. Why do we continue to look gift horses in the mouth? Because we said to Tobago, be careful. Be very careful. Because Tobago is about to change. Nobody listened, apart from Mr. Orville London, who decided to open the rehab facility, which was shut down by 2 others after him. But we warned you. We did warn you before one murder, before one vagrant, before any burglar proof went up in Tobago or happened in Tobago. We warned you. Look where you are today. Why are we even trying to continue to convince people that we have to do things differently? We're sorry, and I personally, as I tell Natasha, I am getting tired. I hope we could make 25 years of this, but we hope you learned something today.
My only comment, yes, of course.
6223937. If you follow the story and you would like to make a further contribution.
My contribution would be, I know I have been in CJ's position. I have went off to university in Jamaica. It was my first time away from home, and all sort of shenanigans took place. Fortunately, I didn't end up in debt as much debt as CJ did, or have to work to earn an income. But life was very difficult because studying, being in a new country, meeting new people, and trying to keep up with the Joneses as a young adult, that is a very difficult thing to do. Not everybody is not prepared for that journey, because corn beef and rice, I had to learn how to cook for myself, how to wash my clothes, how to get a taxi, how to do everything for myself, and I was not prepared. So and I am not unique in that situation. So I mean, it's really incumbent upon young people themselves to know what they want, because I was not ready. I did not want to go to university. My father sent the application for me, so I had to go. But you know what you want, and parents don't force or push your children to do something that they're not ready for. You haven't prepared them for.
But I'll just jump in here. Morning Nation, my experience after college in New York is that, and this is for the parents, you need to stop pacifying children. Because when they get out there and they're exposed to something that is different, they are going to gravitate to something that I don't know. It looks interesting. Yes. It looks intriguing.
Absolutely.
So I think as parents, what we have to do is that we have to not just build their wardrobes and what they wear and where they go, but we need to build their mentality. We have to force them to think on their own, think for themselves, encourage them to have inputs where you all could have discussions, so you could see where your child's mind is, where your child's heart is, where your child's fears are. And it's only when you identify these things you are able to help them structure themselves to be an equipped human being.
Absolutely.
So remember, when it's your first time in university, she mentioned something called Freshers Week. Okay, so you go to Freshers Week with low self-esteem, no inner strength.
Yep. And it's just like the military environment, because they break you down to build you back up. They give you a whole name. They wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They put you through all kind of things, and all that is to break you down to build you back up. But just
6223937. It was a call. If you listen to the conversation, what did you learn? And say happy 91st birthday to Harold Remy's mom.
Yes.
She's 91 today, so happy birthday to you, Miss Rennie.
Miss Remy.
Miss Remy, sorry. Happy birthday, happy 91st birthday.
Wow.
Hang on. Going to Tony and they say, hang on, hang on, mom, hang on. Hang on, 100 wrong recorder. Just hang on.
Yes.
6223937. Good morning. Hello?
Good morning to my esteemed people.
Morning, ma'am.
Garth and Natasha. I just walked in the door. I was out doing some stuff. And I just got a little tail end when you're talking about parents and so on and guidance. You know what I want to tell parents? Do not live your life through your children. Do not. You want to push them to do this and to do that. Let the children decide. Mom, I gravitate towards art and so on and so forth. Support them. Don't fight them down. Oh, you must be a lawyer or a doctor and they hate. what you want for them. So do not try to live your life through your children. That's what I want to tell them.
Well
As
said,
a parent myself, that's what I support, whatever you choose in this life.
Okay,
So thank you guys, and keep up the good work. It's over 24 years. You all are out there. You all are fighting the good fight for Trinidad and Tobago.
Literally,
And I hope both of you get an award when I want to see one of these days. That you all, when I look on my television, I see Kat and Natasha receiving national awards from your fellow citizens. And I would say, well deserved. Well deserved. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Hey, morning, God. Morning, sunshine.
Morning.
And morning to Natasha. What you're trying to say, simply say, sunshine, is do not bring up your children, making them feel that they're better than anybody else. You're trying to say all those words in simplest way I could put it. God, after 25 years still being fight down, God, let me tell you something, bro. And I listen to these sisters, peer pressure is real. I know a lot of college dropouts that I grew up with, local and abroad. God, at the end of the day, brother, at the end of the day, have people that just bent on being bad minds, and their objective is to fight down. And that's just the realities of life, right? And to be crude. But what I should tell people is, laugh and cry live in the same house. And whatever nonsense you put out in the university, that's sober mind. Your children and grandchildren, that's where you're creating to come back at you. And that's why I should tell people, look at Puffy today. He saying, Eli, not gonna start watching the ceiling, and I can tell you, when you see your phone, that tears don't stop running. Right? Because everybody's for kid. God could tell you that. So all I just say to you, brother, you stay strong, you and your wifey. The good job you all have been doing through the years, but have people that believe that they must punish you forever. And that's just the reality because they're bad mind. But God is the boss. And whatever you put out into the universe, whatever you put out in you, this I put into people, whatever you put out into that universe, on a sober mind, rum talk is rum talk, I like plenty of that. But whatever you put out in the universe in a sober mind, remember that is where you're creating to come back at you and your family. Morning, God.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And speaking of it, yes, hold on 1 second, caller.
Yeah, no problem. I'm holding on.
If you could go to a party, and we have those parties here too, folks don't get tired in those freak-off, what they call freak-off parties. We have them here right in Trinidad. And the type of drugs that they use there, you would not believe, But, caller, good morning.
Good morning. There was an earlier caller that had just walked into her door and caught the program towards the end with certain comments you all were making, God. I want to politely but vehemently disagree with her posturing and suggestion and or advice as it relates to allow children to fly in whatever direction. This is basically what she's saying to surmise her comment, whatever direction they feel like. We are in a world of challenge and turmoil. Parents have a responsibility, having walked the talk and lived the life. Therefore, they have got the experience and must adopt the posturing of guidance. I'm not saying dictate to the children. She is suggesting that let them fly. I disagree with that. I am a grandparent, right? And I have been using the posturing of moral suasion and my experience in engaging the grandchildren who are now at university to ensure that they understand what are the expectations out there and how they should conduct themselves. Obviously, once you cut the rope and they go, they're living with that sort of grounding and or training to be able to be sufficiently cognitive to be guided within the realms of what is right and what is wrong. So we have got to be careful. As a matter of fact, I've heard many people utter those similar comments. I took the liberty to do a survey. I interviewed a poll of 100 people. 95% said they shoulda and coulda and woulda if they had done the guiding route with respect to the problems the children and grandchildren got involved in. Have a nice afternoon and a joyous week with God's richest blessings.
All right. Everybody, again, this is the view that we offer people. That's your view. That's the lady's view. I think she tried to at least bring some common sense to the discussion by saying at least give your child the right to decide for themselves rather than you live your life through your children.
Of course.
I think that's what the lady wanted to say.
I think that is sage advice and guidance.
Yeah. So we take one more and 622-3937. Hello, good morning. Hello.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for taking my call. In the interest of time, fantastic story that our girl tell. You know, while we out here comfortable living, there's this kind of serious experience that went on with that lady in Japan and anything. But anything, I just want to ask her if she ever considered during her whole ordeal of strategically informing the police or some kind of authority that, hey, look, I am transporting drugs, I am under a certain amount of duress to do this. Could you help me in terms of getting herself captured to escape these people? You know, at a strategic point in time, like at the airport, before the social, tell them, well, listen, XYZ, these people holding my family, blah, 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 blah. I'd like to hear comments on that. Take care.
All right, yeah, but she's not with us this morning. But I think we raised that the last time we did a story like this.
Yes.
And
the risks of doing
the
that.
The risk of doing that.
And especially knowing the situation her husband would have been in.
Especially that.
She did not want to implicate him because he was not involved in this operation at all. So I think her going to the police at that point would have been, it might have been worse for her and for her husband and her family.
Yep.
And remember, she's pregnant. She is trying to, self-preservation is top of mind for her. So I don't think making a report at that point, and certainly she couldn't do it in Benin, right? She may have been able to do it in the UK, but again, she felt she was between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, so as we go, I'll leave you with this word. As long as tomorrow is still unknown, never look down on anyone. Keep that in mind.
Read that again, God.
As long as tomorrow is unknown, never look down on anyone. Let me leave you with that thought, because to the people of Trinidad and Tobago who say they want crime to stop and crime to solve, and when we come to you to help the government do that, you bluntly refuse. This is what's confusing us right now.
Yeah, you offer a gift to us. Well, to other people through us. That gift is not going to help us. Just FYI. Yeah.
It's sad. It's really sad.
Very sad.
But like I said, we thank the government of Trinidad and Tobago, Counter-Trafficking Ministry of National Security, for still giving us the opportunity to educate you, and we'll continue to do so as long as God wills it. Thank you very much for joining us, and you have been listening to Dependency. Coming up next, major news at 12 is Mr. Daily Knock.
Good afternoon.